Welcome to episode 199 of the Pharmacist Voice podcast. I'm the host, Kim Newlove. Mike Donoghue is on the show today to talk about ConveyMED, the #1 podcast app for medical education. If you're new to the Pharmacist Voice podcast, welcome. Again, my name is Kim Newlove and I'm the host. I'm a pharmacist by training, but I'm not in clinical practice anymore. I made a career transition to voice actor and podcast host. I help clients get their point across in the medical space. Among other things, I narrate audiobooks for women pharmacist authors, provide medical narration to clients in the pharmaceutical, biotech, and continuing medical education industries, and narrate content for explainer videos and e-learning projects. I was inspired by my nonverbal son who has autism to combine my background as a pharmacist with my speaking voice and launch my business, The Pharmacist Voice, in 2017. My son Craig helped me realize the power of having a voice and using it. My solo podcast episodes are about some aspect of being a pharmacist, a voice actor, a pharmacist podcaster, or my career transition from pharmacist to voice actor and podcast host. My interview shows feature a variety of people who use their voices to advocate for something, educate in some way, or entertain so that you are inspired to use your voice too. This is episode 199, and you can find the show notes on my website, thepharmacistvoice.com. Just click on the podcast tab and search for episode 199. As a former physical therapist, Mike Donoghue understands the importance of ongoing clinical education for the sake of optimal patient care. If you want to hear about audio-based medical education, you need to hear our conversation. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with ConveyMED co-founder Mike Donoghue. Hi, Mike. Welcome to the Pharmacist Voice podcast. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Thanks for having me today.
My pleasure. We have a similar joy in continuing education in podcast format, and I can't wait to have you talk to my audience about what you do and how they can benefit from ConveyMED.io. So let's dive into it.
Let's do it.
Yeah. What is ConveyMED.io and what's in it for pharmacists, pharmacy students, pharmacy technicians?
Right. So our thesis is that podcasting is an amazing medium, but we believe it's underutilized as a platform for proper professional education. And in this case, medical education for professionals like pharmacists, pharmacy students, technicians, et cetera. When you make a decision to go into healthcare, you sort of commit to lifelong learning. And whether that's at the student level, at the professional level, you have requirements that you have to continue to maintain your license as a professional. But more importantly, you have the duty and obligation to stay current with the latest clinical practice guidelines on behalf of your patients, because that's who you're there to serve. So if we think about mobile audio, I've been a big podcast consumer for many, many years, and it had really replaced education as a means by which for me to learn. And so we believe that at ConveyMED that mobile audio is a great way to deliver proper professional education. The problem is the places where we all go for podcasts, Spotify, Apple, all the big ones are great, but they're not designed for professional education. So we built the platform for that. So ConveyMED is a podcast platform. It's a mobile audio platform. It's an app. It's available in the App Store. It's available on Google Play. It's free. We host podcasts. We're like a podcast directory, just like all the other big guys, but we only host medical podcasts, those that are specific to healthcare professionals, physicians, pharmacists, nurse practitioners, PAs, all across the treatment care continuum. And then we partner very specifically with educators. They can be associations, they can be independent creators, they can be schools of pharmacy, to create continuing education content that lives exclusively on ConveyMED, because we built the platform for that. And as you know, as a professional, I'm also a healthcare professional. I was a physical therapist for a decade or so. You have to be able to measure learning performance. You have to validate completion. There are some compliance requirements that we've built into our app. And It's a multi-platform. It's a multi-medium platform. So you can listen, you can look at slides, you can engage in quizzes and tests before and after, all those things that are required really for proper professional education. So in summary, ConveyMED is a podcast app for pharmacists, for pharmacy students, for other healthcare professionals to listen to peer-to-peer educational content, and in some cases earn their required CE with the convenience of mobile audio.
I love it. I love what you do. I think it's so important for people to meet people where they're at. People are at their smartphones all the time, and you're meeting them where they're at. That's awesome.
Well, there's interesting data on that. I mean, if you look at internet usage, particularly around the younger professionals, I have gray hair. I'm not a young professional, but my children are. They do everything on their smartphone. And if you look at the data, they spend over 5 hours per day on their smartphone, which seems insane. But that's where they date. That's where they bank. That's where they order their food. That's how they communicate, and so on and so forth. That's what they want to learn. And so to your point, mobile is particularly with very, very, very busy healthcare professionals. Pharmacists are incredibly busy. Everybody in the healthcare world right now is overloaded. There's a lot of talk about burnout. You've probably had podcasts about burnout. It's a thing for sure. And so mobile audio is one of those mediums where, and I think it was the CEO of Audible who said, whenever your eyes are busy, but your mind is free, is a great time to listen to an audio book. We would, of course, say that's a great time to listen to a podcast. And more specifically, that's a great time to stay current with your medical education requirements, more specifically on ConveyMED.
Absolutely. Hey, I think it's a great platform. I have the app, and it took me a second to kind of get used to this because I'm used to consuming podcasts through my Apple Podcasts app. And I downloaded the ConveyMED app onto my iPhone, and it's very easy to use. As I've gotten older, my eyes don't work as well. So I must say that I downloaded it onto my iPad as well, and I like it a little bit better on the iPad. Not because it's too small to read or anything. It's me. It's me, Mike. It's not you. I have the bifocals. I'm 44, and I have the bifocals.
Me too.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually great feedback. The fun thing about this, about creating our platform, as we are engaging with creators like yourself and other professionals, we can learn, you know what, Mike, maybe the font needs to be a little bit bigger so it's easier for me to read. That's great feedback for us. You might be able to send that feedback to Spotify or Apple. They may or may not listen to you, but I doubt it. But I will. And we have a development team that can work with our creators and say, this is not really meeting our needs, but what if you could do A, B, and C? Well, we can put that into our product development pipeline and satisfy that need for our creators and for our listeners. So that's actually great feedback. I agree with you. I have to wear, readers as well. And so that's something we can look at, adjusting over time.
Yeah, or even having the option, how you mentioned Audible a minute ago. On Audible, I believe that you can change the font size, or at least you can on some of these apps where you read things. Kindle's probably a better comparison. But anyways, I do love the app, though. I think it's great. I noticed that there is free content and there is paid content. Can you talk a little bit about both kinds?
One of the things we serve as is we serve as a podcast directory. So if there is we pull in the RSS feeds of the top 200 or so medical podcasts. All that content is free. So just like it's free on Spotify, it's free on ConveyMED. We use a service called Listen Notes, and they service sort of the podcast search engine. And we utilize their API to pull in the RSS feeds of the curated set of shows that we have. And again, all that content is free. And then we partner with exclusive educators, academic medical centers. They can be independent creators. They can be medical associations, and they can create continuing education, accredited continuing education content. And if they choose to, they can monetize it. Users can purchase individual episodes. They can purchase bundles of episodes. And then if our creators want to, they can create a subscription channel. So for all the content that they have, their listeners of their specific channel can purchase a monthly or an annual subscription to their channel, just like, we're all have, Netflix, Hulu, HBO, whatever subscriptions. Now a creator can create a subscription podcast channel on ConveyMED and offer their a mix of free content and paid content. But the premium content, of course, would be subject to purchasing that subscription. So those are the ways that some of our creators are monetizing content on ConveyMED and making it easy for the end user to access it, because you just use Apple Pay or the Google Play, purchase process. You don't have to add your credit card. If you're used to buying products and services on your iPhone, it's a few taps and you're done. It's very, very easy. We tried to make it as easy as possible, again, because our listenership is very, very busy. They don't have time to pull out their credit card and start messing around with all that. We try to make it as simple as possible.
It's always good to use things that people are already familiar with. Yeah, it's just one less step. Now, I'm going to put you on the spot and I'm going to ask, do you have a number one selling podcast for pharmacy CE?
I would tell you the most popular pharmacy podcast right now is the Naplex podcast. A young pharmacist created, really it's almost like an audiobook for pharmacy students who have to take the Naplex exam. As you know, you're a pharmacist. Everybody has to take that before they graduate, before they're licensed. It's a lot of pressure, a lot of options for studying. We think that a great supplement to that is the Naplex podcast, and that has been by far our best seller. And it's actually turned us on to a different use case for our app and for our platform. It's not just about CE. It's really any kind of education that professionals need. So in this case, it's board preparation. So some of our other clients are starting to build board preparation series for maybe their residents or their fellows, or they're further along in their process. They don't need CE yet, but they do need to pass their various levels of boards so that they can practice, so that they can earn CE down the road. And that's been a use case that's really been helpful.
Good looking out. That's another thing that we entrepreneurs do. We fill gaps, and you're filling a gap. People need to pass these board exams. They need a way to study that doesn't involve using their eyes, because everybody's got to wash dishes, walk the dog, all these things. Why not get your education while you're doing something else? I think a lot of us have that mental capacity to do two things at once, right, Mike?
Absolutely. There was an interesting article really in the last week or two I just read from Scientific American, and it talked about learning styles. And we sort of assume that we all have different learning styles, and we do. But what their research showed is that the learning styles were not as important as spaced learning, which is instead of cramming for 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours for an exam, you're better off and you'll retain more of the information and you'll learn more if you space it out over time. Well, things like podcasts or mobile audio that are in the 20 to 30 minute range, maybe they include slides that you can look at while you're listening and a quiz at the end. What they reported in the study is that the comprehension was much greater in that scenario when they're doing it in chunks almost.
Like 15 minutes at a time, 30 minutes instead of 4 hours?
15 to 20 to 30 minutes at a time, but then also, multiple mediums. So, and that's how we built our app. So you can listen, you can also look at slides or notes or images that supplement the learning. And then for those that want to, we can do a post test. So you can say, okay, here's what I learned. Here's some of the notes that I've been given, maybe an outline. Let's do a couple of questions on the subject to make sure and reinforce that learning. And that's actually more important than learning styles, whether you're an audible learner or you're better off reading, or you're a kinesthetic learner. There's lots of different learning styles. And what they said in this particular study is that spaced learning really is an important factor. And we've sort of woven that into how we've designed the platform.
Nice. Yeah, I think I would much rather listen or look at something 15 to 30 minutes at a time instead of waiting till the last second and cramming. I don't know about you, but that kind of was my style back in college, because I had to go to classes and work. I had family obligations, and sometimes I'd only have 4 hours, and that's it. My eyes were on that content. It would have been really nice in the car to knock out 15 minutes of that and only have, less than 4 hours in the end.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Back to this Naplex podcast. I have not subscribed to it on ConveyMED. Can you tell me how much does that particular one cost?
So we offer 3 episodes free. So for those of you who want to, I think I said there's 74, 75 episodes. 3 of them are free. The first one, the middle one, and the last one. So we want, people to experience it so that they can see, okay, well, this is something that I think I can learn from. But for the whole series, it's $84.99. And if you compare that to some of the other test prep options out there, it's a bargain. It really is. And once you purchase it, you own it, right? So you can continue to listen for it's not the only thing. My advice would be that's not the only thing you should do if you're studying for the NAFLEX, for sure. But it's not a very expensive option relative to many of the other test prep options that are available to supplement your learning. And again, you can do the spaced learning, you can listen, you can do all those things to improve your chances to pass the critical step in your professional career, to pass that board exam to move on to the next step. I would have loved to have something like that when I was taking the boards for my for physical therapy back in the Stone Age.
What did we do back then? We'd get together in a big classroom and somebody would review all the information with us. There would be 100 or 200 of us in a room. I know I did it as a pharmacist, but it couldn't have been that much different for physical therapy students, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And it was hard. I mean, to go back and remember things you learned in your first year, it was not easy. And so, yeah, some of the modern approaches to education certainly have changed things. But, there's some other interesting use cases that we're finding with podcasting, specifically with our platform. And that is, one example would be the flipped classroom model, which is if you're going to be going to a program or going to a course, listen to a series of podcasts before you go to the course so you can learn and have a foundation of information before you go and spend a day or 2 days at a conference or 2 days at a specific course learning a specific set of materials, because you've got that foundation of learning. And then the program chairs, for example, can gather data and say, okay, well, this is what some of our learners have learned before they've come, and we can tailor the educational experience that they have live while they're here, and maybe spend more time in interactive discussions and less time in didactic lectures because they would have listened to them before they came to the program. So that flipped classroom model for professional education is something that we are experimenting with a couple of content creators. And so if you're a content creator in the pharmacy space and that's something you're interested in, we sure would love to pursue that, and we can test it and see how different groups of learners respond to that model.
I feel like you're priming the pump, so to speak. You're making sure
exactly.
the water's flowing real good. Before you put the bucket underneath, you're making sure people know what's going on before they go live and really dive deep. I think that's a neat way of doing things.
Yeah, so we'll do our first flipped classroom model here in about 6 weeks. So we'll see what the feedback is. But I think it just makes sense. So we're excited about seeing how the model works.
I like that you're experimenting. And in the very beginning, when we started talking about font size and all that, it sounds like you take that feedback and you use it to make your platform better. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the other thing that we're experimenting with and have experimented with is what's the right length? A lot of CE, what's called webinars, for example, or online enduring continuing education experiences are really just hour-long lectures that they've repurposed into something that is available for you online. If we look at the adult learning principles, adults, unfortunately, as we age, our attention span lessens. So after about 15 minutes or so, many of us are checked out. And so if you look at some of the data around podcast education, the preferred length is really no more than 30 minutes. And 15 to 20 seems to be the sweet spot. And I think it has a lot to do with that spaced learning that we talked about earlier. It has a lot to do with adults' attention spans lessening over time. It seems to be more effective than a 1 hour long lecture. So what we do on ConveyMED and can do with our content creators is, if you have an hour of content, let's split that up into multiple episodes. Maybe they're 4 15-minute episodes, or 3 20-minute episodes, or 2 30-minute episodes. And the accreditors are very flexible in saying, okay, well, if it's a half hour, it's a half credit. Or if it's 15 minutes, it's a quarter credit. A little bit more of an administrative burden maybe for the accreditors, but it's really better for the learners, because instead of having to sit through a whole hour, I can space that out over my commute to the office, I can listen to 15 minutes, or my commute home, I can listen to the second 15 minutes. And it's much more conducive to a busy professional's lives, not to mention, of course, the adult learning principles that we just mentioned.
What kind of feedback are you getting from pharmacists about ConveyMED?
I think the biggest feedback has been around, again, our best-selling, most popular one around the Neplex. And that is, they really like, again, they like the short format. It's around 25 minutes, really no more than in most cases. And it's very specifically segmented out by subject. And the high yield subjects that will be on the tests are covered in each individual summary. And so that's what they like about it. They like it that it's very specific. And again, going back to learning principles as adults, learning as professionals is very self-directed. So there's a specific goal in mind that an adult professional has, and they're seeking to satisfy that requirement, that need. It'd be like if I need to change the light bulb on my 2014 GMC Yukon, I'm going to figure out how to do that. Probably going to go to YouTube, watch a video, and then go do it. Right? That's very specific, and I'll remember how to do that. In the example of Naplex or other board preparation, or if you want to learn about pharmacogenomics, or if you need to learn about some subjects around specialty pharmacy or compounding, or some of those very highly technical segments of pharmacy, you're going to seek out that content. And because you're seeking it out, you're going to remember it, you're going to learn it, you're going to comprehend it more. And then if we put it in these chunks of content that line up with your adult learning principles, you'll have a very satisfying, I think, experience.
Thank you for sharing that. I hope that many pharmacists will listen to this podcast episode and go check out your website. Again, the website's
ConveyMED.io. What you can do is go to the App Store, whether you're on Google. If you're on an Android device, go to the Google Play Store. If you are an iPhone user, go to the App Store and type in ConveyMED and download the ConveyMED app. It's an easy, free download. It's a short little sign up. So what we do ask, since we are doing CME with some of our partners, that you give us your first name, last name, city, state. We're very, very careful with privacy. We do not give our information out to any commercial entities. We're very careful with your private information, very respectful of that. As you sign up with a username, password, a few of your demographics, you will also then go through a process where you'll share with us your interests. So if you're a pharmacist, obviously pharmacy is going to be one of those things. But if you let's say you work in a critical care setting, you might also want, emergency medicine or critical care medicine. The podcasts that match your interests are going to be the episodes and the channels that line up in your feed. You can always search for more content if you're interested in something else that's on there, but your feed is going to be based on your interests. And so again, if you're in critical care, if you're a pharmacist in critical care, you're a pharmacist in infectious disease, in addition to the pharmacy content, you'll get the content for physicians and PAs and nurses that line up with that, because you're obviously a critical part of the treatment team. And that sign-up process usually takes about 2 minutes. And then after that, you'll get daily updates on new podcasts, new episodes that line up with your interests, and then new content or new channels that don't yet exist on ConveyMED, but line up with, let's say, pharmacists. You'll be auto-subscribed to that content. So if we have a content creator out there who's creating new CE content on pharmacogenomics, we'll use that as another example. Once we launch that content, it'll be put in front of all the pharmacists that are current users of ConveyMED for them to decide if this matches their, what they're interested in. They can always unsubscribe if there's a podcast channel that they don't want, but that content will be auto-subscribed to them. So we'll help our creators find their people. We also want our listeners to be introduced to new content that lines up with the interests that they share with us at sign up. And again, you can always search for more content if there's something specific you're looking for. But that's what we would ask you to do. Download the ConveyMED app and send us an email. Let us know what you think.
Mike, if there are some content creators out there who want to get in touch with you and sell their content, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, we would love to work with experts in whatever area that you're in to develop content for your peers, for your colleagues. Whether you're an association or you're a individual pharmacist or a group organization that's creating content, we can help you with accreditation. We can help you and brainstorm with you content format and discussion and so forth. Just email me at mike@conveymed.io. That's mike@conveymed.io. And we'd love to set up a quick 15, 30-minute Zoom to chat and see what your goals are and see how we might work together.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. There might be somebody listening who will be getting in touch with you soon. That's exciting. I'm connecting people. I love that. All right. Well, it sounds like you're doing excellent. Great work. You are connecting people to CE, whether it's free or paid. Now, things are going so well, but what's next?
That's a good question. We already always have new ideas to make our app even better for our end users and for our content creators. Some of our association partners have asked to have private access channels. In other words, a members only channel. So right now you can't do that with us, really can't do that anywhere. So that's some new development that we'll be rolling out in the next 90 days or so. So associations or organizations that want to have the own private access channel just for their members. Or another interesting use case is for schools of pharmacy. If you want to have a podcast just for your students, a place where your faculty can upload some of their lectures so that their students can listen to them on the go, or a place where students can create their own podcasts for their classmates, which again could be a great community building activity and then a way from which for them to all study and work together. We can create a private access channel just for that particular school of pharmacy. So those are some new and exciting use cases that we are developing in the very near term. So if you're a content creator and that's something that you want to look at, please let us know. We'd love to talk to you about that.
That's exciting. I'm sure the students' ears just perked up. Have you started doing that with any schools of pharmacy yet?
Not yet. We're having some preliminary discussions with a few, but I really think that's a great use case. One of the universities that we spoke with, this is not on the pharmacy side, as we were talking to them about building their podcast channel, they're like, our medical students have their own podcast. I don't know where they're putting the content. And I was like, well, that's a great idea. So many of these young students and professionals are very mobile savvy. They're technology savvy. This stuff comes very easy to them. Recording a podcast, particularly if it's just for your classmates, you don't have to worry about music and make it beautiful, sound beautiful and edit and all that stuff like you and I do for some of our clients. You can just, have a conversation amongst your classmates around a particular topic, and the rest of your class would probably benefit greatly from that. It's just like sharing notes. Instead of this way, you're sharing audio notes, case presentations, things like that, I think are great ways in which to share education. And so we're particularly keen on working with a few university programs who are progressive and want to have a go at that. Please reach out to us. We'd love to give that a go and work with you on that project.
There is an exciting future for ConveyMED. That's exciting. But I've got to go a little negative and ask, what's in your way?
Good question. We're a startup, and we're going through the startup pains just like every other startup does. And so just like every organization, you have limited resources and what seems like unlimited opportunities, right? And just like any other company or business or organization, we have to make choices. Sometimes my appetite at the all-you-can-eat buffet is larger than my stomach can handle. So those are the things that are, they're going to be ongoing challenges, I think, for us. But we're very excited about kind of where we are and what we've been able to accomplish in the short term. And there are so many opportunities for us to serve healthcare professionals, and that's really why we're here. Our healthcare professionals, pharmacists, physicians, nurses, they're really our heroes. And we want to be able to be here to serve them and give them, help them stay up to date with all of their requirements, but also most importantly, as we discussed at the very beginning, stay up to date so that they can take better care of their patients.
I like that mission. Yes. Now, how did you get into this? Before we wrap this up, I'd love to know, how did you get this business started? You talked about being a startup. So as a physical therapist, how'd you get into this?
So I'll just give you a very, very brief summary of my career. I'm on my third career. My first career, again, I was a healthcare professional. I was a physical therapist for 10 years. And then I went and got a master's in business and MBA and went to work in the medical device space for about 19 years. I worked for a large multinational orthopedic medical device company. Was a senior executive there for a while. And I left in 2019 because it was time to sort of whet my entrepreneurial appetite. And as I mentioned earlier, I've always been a big podcast consumer. I really believe that podcasts were and continue to be a very, very popular medium. We tested our thesis with one of our association's clients before we started building the app because we wanted to know, will healthcare professionals listen to podcasts for their education? And that pilot test went very well. We went out and got some angel and seed funding and built the app and continued to scale from there. So that's sort of the short version of our founder story.
Mike, it's been a pleasure having you here on the podcast. Is there anything else you'd like to share as we wrap this up?
No, look, again, we're here again to serve the healthcare professional community. And if you are a creator of content or want to be a creator of content, let's talk. If you're a healthcare professional and you would like to have content in this format, let us know what types of information or what types of education you would like to have. And then we will go out and work with some of our content creators and say, there's a demand for this type of education. We've heard from our listeners. This is what they're looking for. And we can work with our content creators to meet that demand. Download the ConveyMED app. Again, it's free in the App Store, and we'd love for you to join our mission.
Thanks for sharing all that. And thank you for being here on the Pharmacist Voice podcast to share how you educate all kinds of healthcare professionals on your app, ConveyMED. Thanks again, Mike. Take care.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
You're welcome. Thanks again, Mike. I have some closing comments, just a couple, then we'll wrap this up. Back in 2017, when I first started the Pharmacist Voice LLC, the business, not the podcast, I got into audio production so that I could narrate pharmacy continuing education journals. When I couldn't find buyers for my service, what did I do? I pivoted to medical narration, audiobooks, podcasting, and more. No hard feelings, universe. I love what I do. How does this relate to ConveyMED? I'm getting there. The ConveyMED app with medical education in podcast format reminds me of why I went into audio production in the first place. And I straight up love what they do because they distribute content, especially podcasts, that serve people like you and me, pharmacists, pharmacy students, and pharmacy technicians who are continuous learners. If you like to learn via audio too, download the app today. And just a quick disclaimer, I am not compensated in any way for these comments. I just really love what ConveyMED does. Last thoughts here. I hope that Mike Donoghue has inspired you by how he uses his voice. In my introduction, I always say that my interview shows feature a variety of people who use their voices to advocate for something, educate in some way, or entertain so that you are inspired to use your voice too. That should sound familiar anyway. Well, Mike advocates for medical education in podcast format. He educates a variety of healthcare professionals using his app, and he is an entertainer by default because I consider podcasts to be both entertainment and education at the same time when it comes to what he's doing with ConveyMED. Mike Donoghue checks all the boxes for me, and he is passionate about what he does. Now, if you have a strength or a passion, I want you to feel inspired by Mike to use your voice too. That's all I've got for you today. Thank you for joining me for episode 199 of the Pharmacist Voice podcast. Please visit thepharmacistvoice.com to read the show notes. In the show notes today, you will find Mike Donoghue's bio and email, a link to ConveyMED's website so you can download the app. You'll also find my social media links and more. If you know someone who would like this episode or needs to hear it, please share it with them. And if you like this podcast, please subscribe to or follow the Pharmacist Voice podcast on your favorite podcast player and YouTube to get each new episode right when it comes out. I'll be back next Friday, February 17th with my winter update. If you are new to this podcast, my winter update is a solo show, and it's also a quarterly update on what's going on with my business, my podcast, my family, and what I'm listening to, reading, watching, and playing. These are fun episodes for me, and they might help you get to know me better as a person. For example, my husband's changing jobs this month on February 20th, and that's a big deal. I'll spill all the details about that life change and how it'll affect our family when I talk to you next week. Plus, next week is my 200th episode. I'll be celebrating that as well, of course. Thanks again for listening. I'll talk to you next week.